Actually, April 9th.
He said April 9th, and they won't let him to our meeting. What is it? They're hearing things like supposedly. You know, here, I mean,
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 6:02 at the time. At this time, we begin our council meeting. Call ourselves to order at this time, and Mr. Larry, we'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. The City Council uses a consent agenda to consider items that are non-controversial and routine. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and voted of the council. Items may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda at the request of a council member or citizen with consent of council. The consent agenda contains the following 7 items, the first of which is approval and acceptance of minutes and reports. We have 4 sets of minutes, lettered A through D. Item 1E is the disbursement for fiscal year 2015 through 2016 of City Council discretionary funds. The council members are provided $3,000 each on an annual basis for disbursement at their discretion towards items that meet the public purpose definition of permitted items that a municipality is authorized to perform. There's one set of disbursements for this period, and involved Mayor Kilgore disbursed $25 for the 8th District Black Leadership Caucus banquet. Item 1F concerns the financial reports for February 2016, and it's just a summary. The unassigned general fund balance is a little more than $7 million as of February 29th, and the total fund balance is $27 million change as of February 29th, 2016. Item 1G is a summary of contracts awarded, change orders approved, city manager's settlement of claims, and the city manager's discretionary fund. There were no claims settled nor disbursements from the discretionary fund. The number of contracts awarded are 29 that totaled a little more than $425,000. Item 1H concerns tax releases for February 2016. And this is for the purpose of disclosing there were no refunds or releases reported for February, and therefore no action required of council. Item 2 under consent is the advertisement of unpaid real estate property taxes. This is for the purpose of complying with North Carolina General Statute 105-369, which compels the tax collector to report the total unpaid real estate tax to council that are liens on the property. And upon receipt, council orders the tax collector to advertise a list of unpaid real estate taxes, which total $1,624. The ad is scheduled to appear on April 10th in the Inquirer Journal, and a copy of the list is available in the city tax office. Item 3 involves 2 sets of budget amendments. The first is for the purpose of the police department's acceptance of a $150 donation from Advanced Driver Training Services. The proceeds will be used for youth programs. The second is for the purpose of the fire department's receipt of 3 items: a grant award of $430 from North Carolina Department of Insurance to be used for the purchase of child safety seat program signage. The second is reimbursement of $580 in material costs associated with hazardous materials used in response to vehicle accidents and incidents. The third is discretionary expenditures of $500 from Councilmember Gary Anderson to be used for the fire department's Explorer Post 181. The fourth item is for the purpose of calling 4 public hearings to be held on April 5th, 2 of which are grant-related and 2 are for zoning map amendments. The first of 2 hearings for grants is to consider awarding a downtown economic development pronto incentive grant to Backstage Vintage Apparel, which would provide a rent subsidy totaling just under $7,000 annually. The second hearing is to consider awarding of an economic development level 2 incentive grant involving a confidential company that has reported a projected capital investment of $6 million. And if approved, grant payments would be made over a 5-year period up to $132,000 in total. The last 2 hearings being called are for zoning map amendments. The first is for property located at 2112 Morgan Mill Road from Conditional District 2112 Morgan Mill Road to Conditional District James River Equipment. The second is for a property located at 514 Mill Street from General Industrial to Conditional District Piedmont Buggy Works Apartments. 5, for the purpose of approving budget amendments and a waiver of $6,861 in fees to Newtown Custom Homes and Realty for the construction of the St. Jude Dream Home. The house is to be raffled off as a fundraising effort. The proceeds are reported as being used to support the youth cancer research and treatment under the auspices of St. Jude's Hospital. The home location proposed for Fox Hunt Estates. Item 6 under consent is for the purpose of accepting the code supplement that includes ordinances adopted by council through December 31st, 2015. The supplement is completed on an annual basis to maintain the consistency and currentness of the city code. The work is jointly performed by city staff under the clerk's direction and with American Legal Publishing Corporation. Item 7 involves 2 resolutions that are proposed. The first is resolution for the purpose of approving the lease agreement with U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency for the customs operation at our airport. The lease finalizes the memorandum of understanding with the agency that was initiated on or about January 4th of 2011. The lease term is for 20 years and is characterized as a 1-year lease with 19 renewals. The second resolution is for the purpose of requesting Union County Board of Commissioners to make an appointment filling extraterritorial jurisdiction member vacancies pursuant to North Carolina General Statutes 160A-362 and local city code provisions. Once notified, the county commissioners have up to 90 days to complete the appointment. There is a vacancy of an ETJ member on the planning board and the Board of Adjustments, which we seek to have filled. Mayor, members of the City Council, this concludes my summary of those items placed on the consent agenda.
Any questions, comments?
Move approve.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, consent agenda is passed. Regular agenda, item 8, application for staffing for adequate fire emergency response, a safer grant. Mr. Ron?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Mr. Manager, thank you for allowing me to present this to you. What you have before you is a request to authorize staff to apply for a federal grant. It's the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response, or also known as the SAFER grant. And what we're proposing is to apply for this grant to hire 3 firefighters, and these 3 firefighters would replace the 3 positions that we lost in the fiscal year 12-13 budget. These firefighters would be assigned to Engine 1, which is downstairs here, is currently assigned with a 3-person company. And our goal is to have it at the 4-person company level. This grant is a 2-year grant, and for those 2 years, the grant, if awarded, will pay 100% of salary and benefits for each position awarded. The obligation on our part is that we cannot incur any layoffs or reductions in staff in the fire department during those 2 years. So it's a 2-year grant, 100% of salary and benefits. But again, our obligation is that during those 2 years, we have to maintain the current staffing levels, can't have any reductions in staff during that 2 years. The total amount is approximately $361,000. And again, that covers the salary and benefits for 3 firefighters for 2 years. There's certainly a definite need for these positions. As you know, our goal is to maintain 4-person staffing on each of the companies. We had to reduce that in that fiscal year 13 budget when we lost those 3 positions. I guess the first and foremost need is the safety of the firefighters, and also the safety of our citizens. There's been numerous studies that show that 4-person staffing is safer than 2 or 3-person staffing. This also relates to OSHA standards that we have to meet. Having that additional person helps us better meet those standards. It makes us more effective. It basically increases our level of service. Just quite simply, when you're doing the same job on a fire scene, you can just do that quicker with 4 firefighters than you can 3. There's been studies conducted that show that as well. NIST, the National Institute of Safety and Technology, did a very in-depth study, and it shows that across the board and all the different tasks that firefighters do on fire scenes. So it just helps us be more effective when we do have a fire emergency at someone's home or business. It is a nationally recommended standard that we maintain 4-person staffing. The National Fire Protection Association, their standard 1710 recommends a minimum of 4-person staffing on fire companies. You may recall that in 1998, when we did the public safety separation, the study that we had done locally, that the council had done locally, recommended those 4-person companies. And you know, we strive for years to get there. You know, in the early 2000s when we were building the fire department, I know the ones that were on the council then remember that, but we made it. You know, we got all the companies up to 4, and then we lost those 3 positions, and you know, a few years ago. It does have an effect on our ISO rating. We anticipate that our next ISO grading will be in approximately a year. Sometime during 2017 is when we anticipate that next ISO rating will be. So it will have an effect on that. And it also has our accreditation. We're up to be reaccredited in 2017 as well. So all of these things are just different reasons that we need those positions. So I would ask for your support to apply for this grant. We have included these 3 positions in our 2017 budget request, but obviously if we can get them through this grant, then that would be better for everyone. So,
Chief, when's the last time you applied for a grant for personnel?
We applied for the same grant last year, and we did not receive it. The feedback that we got back from the grant office was that we had a good grant, that the need is there. They just simply ran out of funding before they just simply couldn't fund all of the grant requests that they had. So the last request was a year ago for the same grant.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the grant.
Second. Oh, Ms. Anthony.
I just had the question, are you facing a deadline to file for the grant?
Yes, ma'am, and I'm glad you mentioned that. This has not been before the Public Safety Committee. The grant application deadline is the 25th, and it was only open for 30 days. So just because of meeting schedules, it has not been before the Public Safety Committee. And I apologize for that, but just, again, because of the meeting schedules, we were not able to do that. So that's the reason we're coming to council. We do have it on the Public Safety Committee agenda for the meeting next week, but again, we needed to come to council just because of the schedule of meetings.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any other questions, comments, council? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that'll pass. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Chief.
Item 9, we'll turn that over to Majib. Resolution intent to consider changing the election schedule.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an outgrowth of a discussion that started back in November, where we were asked as a staff to look into what would be required to change the city's election system from the current election and runoff system, which means you have an election in October and a runoff in November, to having the elections on the single traditional November election day. We've discussed this at your January 5, 2020 Council Strategic Planning meeting. There are questions that were raised, and we've answered those by two memoranda to help answer the questions raised by council. If this is something council wishes to go forth with, the first step now would be to adopt this resolution. And the resolution that is attached states that the council intends to make the change in its election method, and it also sets a public hearing for April 19, 2016 as the date the staff just selected, but if council wants to change the date to a later date, that is fine. The reason we set April the 19th at the earliest is because there has to be a notice published about the public hearing, and then it will give the public an opportunity to comment on this plan. The only change that this council has suggested that we make would be to change to The election method being the plurality method, it would still be nonpartisan. There would be no alteration in the terms for any council members. It would not affect how long a council member would be elected in the 2017 election. It would only affect the method of how the council members elected. It would not affect the mayor's term, which would still remain at 2 years. I'm happy to answer any questions council has, and we're happy to answer any questions about the process.
A couple of questions. When this originally came before the city council, there was an indication that at some point in time we had the system that we're trying to get back to where we voted in November, because it was insinuated that the system that we were using had been changed at some point in time, and apparently you've found out that we went from an earlier system that was the same, or went from earlier dates where we still use the same system. We would, it's nonpartisan, you know, we would have the election and then the runoff about a month later. And you still have not been able to find a date where we actually just voted in November, and when we never had a system different than what we've got now. What
we were able to find is back as far as the 1800s, you had an April election. And into the 1900s, you had, a May election. And then what you had is an April primary and then a May election. And that system appeared to exist all the way up to about 1975. The 1969 amendments, or there was a local act dealing with it in 1969, and it made it clear that you would have a April primary and then a May general election. Then in 1975, council requested charter changes that expanded the council and made it clear that you were using at that time an election, and the election and runoff system. What happened is in 1971, the State General Assembly changed the election calendars and the elections laws to set a new calendar. So under the system the city was using, which was a primary election and then an election, that moved that to October and to November, which is a system that you currently see in many other municipalities. And then in 1975, it was clear that the council had decided it wished to move to a election and runoff system. By the way it's set up, the new system where the expanded council, the top 3 members receiving a majority of votes would receive the 4-year terms, and then the next 3 that received a majority of the votes would get a 2-year term. But if people didn't meet that, there would be a runoff election later. So what we were able to determine is at that point, that's when the first time the city clearly decided it would use election and runoff versus primary and election. So up to at least 1975, it was a primary election and election. And then clearly from 1975 forward, it was election and runoff, which is what you've had. And then it hasn't been changed since. When we made reference to the 2000 charter revision, that was a comprehensive charter revision, but there was no change in the system at that time.
The 1971 date that you referenced and the 1975 date that you referenced with regard to the change in the election system, did those changes require U.S. Justice approval, pre-clearance?
It would have at that time, and I'm not aware of whether or not the Department of Justice did pre-clearance at that point, but I would assume they would have, because Union County, I do not believe, was exempt from the pre-clearance requirement at that time. The 1971 changes were done by the General Assembly as an overall change that would come into effect in 1973. I cannot speak to whether or not the Department of Justice weighed in, except for every other piece of data we have from that period show that the elections did indeed take place in 1973. In fact, the issue ended up being is that because the date had changed, council received a presentation from the State Board of Elections representatives to advise them that now, with the change in dates, that those elected would not elected, but those that would be elected the next term would maintain their seats until December. But the Department of Justice would likely have had to deal with pre-clearance, which they would have all the way up until a year or two back when the Supreme Court basically determined that there would be no need for pre-clearance any further. So we would say that the Department of Justice would have had to have weighed in, at the very least, on the changes to the city's election system. The Department of Justice would have to have weighed in likely with respect to what North Carolina's changes would have been if it affected the system. But we think at the very least the 1975 changes would have dealt with pre-clearance.
Okay, and then just finally, I know when we had major annexations, we had to go through pre-clearance.
Yes, sir.
With the Justice Department, and I would imagine the last time we went through that pre-clearance would have been annexation we did for 601 North and maybe 200 North. So we've always had the Justice Department give an oversight into our elections to make sure that our elections were fair and did not impede the ability of all of our citizens to be able to vote. That's all I have.
And Councilmember Jordan, you're absolutely correct. As a pre-clearance did exist until the Alabama case that the Supreme Court decided, which eliminated that, and that's of course prompted a series of other changes. One of which would be today, if you're voting the primary, the requirements of voter ID, as opposed to anything else. But you are correct. The pre-clearance did exist, and the Justice Department did weigh in. I do not believe Union was an exempt county for that. So you would be correct, sir.
Any other questions or comments?
I'd like to make a motion, Mayor. I've had a lot of comments from residents about this issue, so I'd like to make a motion that we adopt this resolution and call for the public hearing.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
One, is that what I hear? One, nay? Okay. You get that. Okay, that brings us down to item 10, the public comment period, and I have some, I'll take the names that have signed up, and the first one will be Loretta. May I say Loretta?
Yes, please.
If you will come to the podium, give you your name and address so we have it for record, please.
Okay, sure. Loretta Melanson, 2923 Meadow Creek Lane in Monroe. I want to first of all make it clear that I speak as an individual who lives in the Lakeside subdivision. There are quite a few residents that agree with the things I'm going to say, but there are others that, for whatever reason, are very negative about certain things. I want to say thank you, first of all, to the city of Monroe. We had some drainage issues, and our streets were in bad need of resurfacing. That was done this past year, and I didn't realize I had so little time to speak. I wanted to recognize individuals, but just let it be said that the city as a whole really cooperated, and I got response when I needed it, and I appreciate it. The other thing I'd like to address tonight, I'm very dismayed about the litter situation here in the city. Not so much in the downtown area, but I live off of Olive Branch Road and Morgan Mill, and I have had some help from the DOT because they can bring gun crews out occasionally, but it doesn't last long, and I know they are restricted to do any of the roads that are within the city limits. As far as I can tell from some inquiries I've made, there is no real focus on controlling litter here in Monroe, and I'd like to have some guidance and maybe some assistance from the city to find ways to bring this into public awareness. You know, I've thought of things as simple as a sign that says, "Don't litter and fine $250," or whatever it is. I've been directed to the police department to discuss this further, and I will do that. But I'm here tonight basically to ask for guidance as to, you know, who should I go to first. I'm going in different directions, and it's very confusing to me. I have a heart that wants to be involved in this. I know that at some point I had seen something about a community appearance committee. I don't know, there was something at one point about committees that people could volunteer for, and I don't even know if that one exists anymore. Do you know?
I'll certainly have the clerk to give you a call tomorrow. I'll ask the city manager to work with you and whoever he assigns to give you a call.
Yeah, I
didn't
just
say
don't
clerk.
know where to put my focus. I have all this energy I want to put toward it, but I'm spinning my wheels. The other thing that I had the good fortune to discuss with Doug Britt on Saturday, and by the way, that Forward Monroe movement is fantastic. I happened to read about it, and I showed up, and I met so many of the key players here in the city, and we briefly talked about the possibility of a neighborhood park of some sort. I like to talk in terms more of a neighborhood natural area. So Doug has agreed to work with me to identify the people who own the property that may be a possibility. And again, if there is someone else from the city that I might work with, to focus again, myself, my efforts, and just get the answers we need to know if this is even possible. I love to walk in the neighborhood, and in fact, Marie Taylor said to be sure to tell you hello, Mayor. She and I walk together and often at night, and that was part of why we had to get our streets resurfaced. But there's a piece of property in the middle of our area that was never developed, and through it you can reach 2 other neighborhoods, but we're trespassing right now if we go through. But anyway, so those are my 3 things: to say thank you, to address my concern with the litter, and also to know where to start to investigate the possibility of this.
Yes, ma'am, we have your name and address and number, and you,
Okay.
somebody with the staff will be contacting you.
Great.
Thank you for coming up. Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am.
I have a question. Doug, do we do the adopt a road, a highway type? Are we?
Yeah, we're gonna talk after the meeting, too, though, because we call them, we play phone tag today, but, yeah, I can get her in touch with Lori Purcell, our
Okay.
service coordinator, about that, though.
Good. All right, thank you.
Second one, Mr. Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Robert Yanchek, 513 Everett Street, and I guess I was kind of late coming in, but I come before you as a citizen and a pilot. And first I want to say you guys have a great asset out there at the Monroe Airport. I fly out there on a regular basis, and it's a wonderful facility and great employees. But I saw tonight the City Council approved a resolution on the Customs Building, and I was kind of shocked that there wasn't a public hearing on this topic because it's such a huge budget item. Looking at the budget for 2016-17, it's $194,000 in a contract that could turn into a 20-year contract. And like I said, there's other things in that contract that I don't totally agree with. I love aviation, and most of my friends do. I'm just not sure without a public hearing that was the best method. I would like to know what kind of revenue we're generating from the Customs Building. When we're told that there's not enough money for road humps and code enforcement officers and things like that, $200,000 a year seems like a big budget item when we may not be getting anything in return. The original cost was a little over $2 million. It's a beautiful building, but I'm just not sure it's going to be utilized for what the city needs. I'd just like to put that on record. I think we need to explore that building a little more before we get too deep into a government contract for 20 years.
Robert, if someone will follow up with you, some of the staff will get to follow up on this with you.
Yeah, didn't we have a public hearing several years ago when they decided to do the Customs Building?
Yes, we
I
did.
wasn't on the council, but I
thankful, but I
remember
don't
we
know.
had a public hearing.
Sure did.
All right.
We're one of the few cities, small cities in the country that has the customs building, which is a tremendous honor. And, you know, it's funny, if our area wants to have money to do a lot of the things that our residents want, they better hope that the airport and the business park continue to do the job that they're doing, because that's where your jobs come from and that's where your tax base is generated.
I have no opposition to that. I'm out there a good bit, and I'm just kind of curious to see what the revenue has been generated from it. Is there, you know, corporations that are planning to come there? I mean, it's been there for about 2 years now. I know the building was built a couple years ago, and there might have been a public hearing back then, but before the contract is officially signed, and it's a government contract. I was looking at it today, and it's about a 30-page contract, so I think I'd love to have our city attorney kind of go through it, and I'm sure he
We've
already
reviewed it.
has.
We've reviewed it.
So, but I just think, you know, it should be brought before the public before it's signed. Because I don't think it's officially been approved yet, is that correct? Or,
It was approved
and it was approved
by council tonight.
before the public hearing, so. I just didn't know if there's a public hearing on the actual contract. If that public hearing was when it was constructed, or,
I'm sure there were, but I don't know that, so I'd have to look that up. But
because I know apparently tonight, I guess it was approved for a 1-year contract that could go into a 20-year, is my understanding. So before like I said, I have no trouble with the building if it shows some sort of promise. I just think $194,000 is a lot for just a couple of people flying in from another country. Like I said, if it's fully utilized, I think that's one thing. But if it's not, that's another.
all right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you, Robert. Okay. Also, I'd like to say on April the 9th, we'll have a meeting that's on a Saturday at 8:30 in the morning. We'll meet at 8:30 in the morning on April the 9th. We'll be doing some budget work. And also on April the 18th at 5 o'clock in the afternoon here at City Hall. Of course, those meetings will be advertised, but I wanted to mention that tonight. Anything else to the council?
Move adjourned.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none, we adjourn. Thank you very much.